Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. My name is Olivia Peterson and I am 34 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. Before I met him, my life felt ordinary. I had a decent job working in marketing for a small tech company here in Portland. I had friends, a comfortable apartment, and a routine that felt safe but perhaps a little too predictable. I'd had relationships before, but nothing that ever felt like it would last, nothing that truly shook my world or made me believe in forever. I was at an age where many of my friends were getting married, having kids, or settling down, and while I was genuinely happy for them, there was a quiet part of me that longed for that kind of deep connection, that feeling of being truly seen and understood by another person. I was a bit guarded, I think, maybe a little cynical about love because of past disappointments, but underneath it all, I desperately wanted to believe that the kind of love you read about in books or see in movies was possible for me. I spent my evenings reading, sometimes trying new restaurants with friends, going for long walks in Forest Park, just existing. It wasn't a bad life by any stretch of the imagination, but it lacked a certain spark, a certain depth I craved. I was open to love, but I wasn't actively searching for it, resigned to the idea that if it happened, it happened. Then he came into my life and everything changed in an instant. He was charming, attentive, and seemed almost too perfect. He listened intently when I spoke, remembering tiny details I'd mentioned weeks before. He laughed at my jokes, even the silly ones, and seemed genuinely fascinated by my thoughts and feelings. We had so much in common it felt uncanny, like finding a mirror of my own soul. For the first time I felt completely understood, completely seen for who I truly was, flaws and all, or so I thought. Looking back now, with the cold clarity that hindsight provides, I see it for what it was, love bombing. It was an intense, overwhelming wave of affection and validation designed to sweep me off my feet and make me dependent on his approval. In the second month of dating, he did things that felt like grand gestures lifted straight from a romance novel. He had a small boat, nothing fancy, just a little motorboat, and one sunny Saturday, he took me out on the Willamette River, past the bridges and the city noise, all the way out to a tiny, uninhabited island he knew about. He'd packed a gorgeous lunch he'd prepared himself at home: fresh bread, gourmet cheeses, cured meats, olives, a beautiful fruit salad, and a bottle of chilled Italian limoncello. We ate on a blanket under a tree, the water lapping gently nearby, and it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Later, we went diving off the side of the boat in a quiet cove, and he swam down and found a giant, perfect seashell, presenting it to me when he surfaced, calling it a token of his love for me. It was incredibly romantic, incredibly thoughtful, and it solidified my belief that he was different, that he was special. Soon after that, he took me to his childhood home, a small, slightly run-down house in a neighboring town that his family had kept. He showed me pictures of his parents who were deceased, speaking about them with such tenderness that it brought tears to my eyes. He gave me his old toy, a faded, worn wooden train engine he claimed was his fondest childhood memory, saying he wanted me to have it because I was becoming his fondest adult memory. Each of these acts felt incredibly significant, incredibly personal, and they forged a bond that felt unbreakable. I was utterly convinced he was the one. This was it. My search was over. I had found my person, but if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. That perfect, overwhelming phase didn't last forever. Slowly, subtly, things started to change. At first, it was just little things, easily dismissed or rationalized away. He'd make a cynical comment here and there about the way I looked that day, or something I said that he twisted into something foolish or naive. These comments, delivered with a smirk or a sigh, chipped away at my confidence and made me feel increasingly insecure around him. He'd flirt with other women right in front of me, not even trying to hide it, watching my reaction out of the corner of his eye. It was a deliberate tactic to make me jealous, to provoke a response from me that he could then label as controlling or irrational. I'd be hurt, sometimes I'd cry, and he'd apologize, temporarily reverting back to his old, romantic, loving self, showering me with affection and reassuring me that I was the only one for him. This cycle of push and pull, of showering me with love then withdrawing it and causing pain, became more and more frequent. His outbursts became worse, the criticisms sharper, the flirting more blatant. The amount of pleading with him, the constant need to convince him of my love and devotion just to earn a little bit of the affection he initially showed me, was growing each time. I felt emotionally exhausted, drained by the constant performance I felt I had to put on to keep him happy, to keep him from turning cold or critical. I was walking on eggshells, terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing that might set him off. The man who had made me feel so safe and cherished was now making me feel constantly anxious and inadequate. One evening, I got out of the shower and walked back into the living room, wrapped in a towel. He was sitting on the couch, and I glanced over and saw his laptop open on his lap. My blood ran cold when I saw the familiar layout of an online dating site on the screen. He saw me looking and quickly closed the laptop, but not before I recognized the site. I asked him, my voice trembling, what he was doing. He didn't even hesitate. He looked me straight in the eye and said with a casual shrug that he had made sure I saw what he was checking out to see if I'd get jealous and controlling again. He tried to spin it as a test, a way to gauge my reaction and see if I had trust issues. I didn't believe him for a second. His explanation was flimsy, his demeanor too calm. My gut screamed that he was lying, that this wasn't some twisted test of my jealousy, but something much worse. A cold dread settled in my stomach. A few years prior, early on in our relationship, he had called me on the phone, frustrated because he was terrible with computers. He wanted help setting up an online account for playing chess. It was a specific site, and the process of setting up a username and password was a bit more complicated than usual, requiring specific character types and lengths. He had grown impatient as I tried to guide him over the phone and had just blurted out the exact username and password he wanted to use, asking me to type it in for him while he stayed on the line. I had remembered that username and password. It was simple, something easy to recall, and he seemed to use it for everything. Standing there in the living room, wrapped in my towel, watching him coolly lie to my face, that memory flashed into my mind. After he gave his pathetic explanation and went back to whatever he was doing, I went to our bedroom, my mind racing. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone. I opened the web browser and navigated to the dating site I had seen on his laptop screen. I typed in the username he had used for the chess site. Then, with a deep breath, I typed in the password he had given me years ago. It worked. I was logged into his profile. What I saw next shattered the fragile reality I had been clinging to. Not only was he actively chatting up other women, sending them messages, liking their photos, but it was clear from some of the conversations that he hadn't just been talking. He had met other women in person, and he had sex with them. The evidence was undeniable, laid bare in the digital transcripts of his deceit. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. He wasn't just looking, he wasn't just flirting, he was living a double life, a secret life built on lies and infidelity. And then I saw something else that twisted the knife even further. Some of the conversations contained intimate details about me, about our relationship, about what he was dissatisfied with about me. He was complaining about me, sharing private aspects of our life with strangers on the internet, using my vulnerabilities as fodder for his online affairs. Reading his words, seeing how easily he dismissed me, how casually he discussed sleeping with other women while claiming to love me, felt like a physical blow. The hurt was so intense, so overwhelming, that I sank to the floor right there in the bedroom, the phone still clutched in my hand. I cried like a little baby, the kind of gut-wrenching sobs that shake your entire body. All the little things, the cynical comments, the flirting, the gaslighting, the constant need to prove myself, they all coalesced into this one devastating truth. He was a liar and a cheater, and the beautiful, perfect beginning of our relationship, the part I had been clinging to with all my might, the part that had made me feel the happiest I had ever been in my life, was a carefully constructed illusion. It was all fake. The man I thought I knew, the man I loved, didn't exist. I stayed on the floor for what felt like hours, the world shrinking down to my pain and the glowing screen of my phone. The tears eventually stopped, leaving me feeling hollowed out and numb, and then slowly something shifted inside me. The raw pain began to harden, to calcify into something cold and sharp. The despair didn't lessen, but it transformed. I was still heartbroken, but the overwhelming sense of helplessness began to recede, replaced by a quiet, simmering rage. I decided I wouldn't just be a victim, I wouldn't just walk away broken. He had hurt me deliberately, systematically, using my own desire for love against me. He had built his perfect facade on my vulnerability, and he was going to pay for it. A chilling calm settled over me. My mind, usually prone to overthinking and anxiety, became remarkably clear and focused. An idea began to form, an idea born from the very tool he had used to betray me, online dating. I would use his own playground against him. That night I didn't confront him, I didn't say a word about what I had found. I pretended everything was normal, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. But while he slept soundly beside me, oblivious, I was wide awake, already plotting. The next day, still reeling but resolute, I began to set my plan in motion. I created a fake online dating profile, the first of many to come. I spent time crafting the persona, choosing photos I found online that weren't easily traceable, writing a profile that sounded attractive but also plausible. I studied his dating profile carefully, noting the types of women he seemed to gravitate towards, the language he used, the things he looked for. I tailored the fake profile to be exactly what he would find irresistible. I started chatting with him through the fake profile, adopting a flirty, engaging persona. It was sickeningly easy. He responded almost immediately, drawn in by the profile I had designed. We chatted for a few days, the conversation flowing effortlessly, built on the superficial connection I was fabricating. I felt a strange mix of disgust and a morbid fascination as I interacted with him this way, knowing his true nature while he believed he was talking to a new prospect. After a few days of intense messaging, he suggested meeting in person. I feigned hesitation, playing hard to get just enough to make him want it more. He insisted, pressing me for a date and time. I reluctantly agreed to meet him at a large, busy coffee house near downtown Portland, a place where I knew I could blend in and observe without being seen easily. Act 2 had begun, and the struggle was not just against him, but against my own emotions, my own morality. The revenge felt necessary, but it was a dark path to walk. The day of the first planned fake date arrived. My stomach was a knot of nerves and anticipation. I got ready carefully, choosing clothes that were unremarkable, pulling my hair back, even wearing glasses I didn't normally wear, trying to make myself look as inconspicuous as possible. I wanted to be able to see him clearly, to watch his reaction without him having any chance of recognizing me. I arrived at the coffee house about 20 minutes before the agreed-upon time. I found a table in a corner, partially obscured by a large plant, with a clear view of the entrance and the main seating area. I ordered a drink and settled in, my heart pounding. I half hoped, in a desperate, lingering corner of my mind, that he wouldn't come, that this whole nightmare was just a bad dream I would wake up from. But even as that thought crossed my mind, I knew it was futile. He was a creature of habit and desire. He would be there. About 10 minutes before the scheduled meeting time with the mystery woman, I decided to add another layer to the setup. I called him on my regular phone, pretending I was just checking in. "Hey, where are you? I was wondering if you wanted to grab coffee later," I asked, trying to keep my voice light and casual. He paused for a beat and then said, with a practiced ease that made my skin crawl, that he couldn't because he had an errand to run, something important he had to take care of. He didn't mention meeting anyone, of course. My heart sank a little further, confirming his deception once again, even though I already knew. I ended the call and turned my attention back to the coffee house entrance. Sure enough, just a few minutes later, there he was. He walked in, scanning the room with that familiar, confident air that now looked like arrogance to me. He checked his watch, looked around again, and then found an empty table near the window and sat down. At first, watching him sit there, waiting for a woman who didn't exist, I thought I was getting a panic attack. My chest tightened, my breathing became shallow, and the room seemed to swim before my eyes. It was the residual trauma, the pain of the betrayal bubbling to the surface. But I took a deep breath, focusing on the details, on the task at hand. I managed to calm myself down, pushing the emotional turmoil aside, channeling it into cold observation. He first waited patiently, glancing at his phone, occasionally looking up at the door. Then, as the minutes ticked by and his supposed date didn't appear, he started fidgeting. He drummed his fingers on the table, checked his phone more frequently, and began looking at every woman who came in, his gaze lingering, assessing. And then, as if by divine intervention, or maybe just a cruel twist of fate, a woman walked in who looked remarkably similar to the profile picture and description I had used for the fake persona. She had the same hair color, roughly the same build, and was dressed in a similar style to how I had described myself online. He immediately perked up, his eyes fixing on her. Without hesitation, he got up from his table and walked straight over to her. I watched, my breath caught in my throat. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I saw him lean in, saw him talking animatedly. The woman looked confused, then annoyed. She dismissed him with a shake of her head, but he was persistent, gesturing and continuing to talk. At that point, she got visibly agitated with him, saying something sharp and emphatic before turning her back and walking away. I saw him standing there for a moment, looking deflated before slowly walking back to his table. He sat there for another half an hour, looking increasingly frustrated and checking his phone repeatedly, presumably for a message that would never come from the fake profile. Finally, with a defeated slump of his shoulders, he got up and left. I waited until he was long gone before I gathered my things and left the coffee house. That afternoon, I didn't wait long. I logged back into the fake dating profile I had used to contact him. I sent him a message. I told him that I was indeed the woman he had spoken to in the coffee house. I said that I had seen him, that I had been sitting nearby, but that when he came over to me, I found him physically unattractive in person compared to his photos, and that I lacked the courage to discuss it with him publicly, so I had faked not knowing who he was and had dismissed him. I added that I was terribly sorry for standing him up and for not being upfront, that I felt bad about it. I watched the little typing bubble appear and disappear as he wrote his reply. He responded, saying it was okay, no hard feelings, and that he understood. But I knew him. I knew how narcissistic and self-aware he was, how much his ego mattered to him. There was no way he was unbothered by being told he was physically unattractive in person, especially after he had been so confident walking up to the wrong woman. This was not okay for him. It was a direct hit to his carefully constructed self-image. The feeling of satisfaction was immediate and potent. It wasn't pure joy, not like the happiness he had pretended to give me, but a cold, hard sense of having struck back, of having regained a tiny piece of the power he had stolen from me. It was the first step in dismantling his facade, in making him feel the discomfort and confusion he had inflicted on me. And once I felt that power, that ability to disrupt his life just as he had disrupted mine, I couldn't stop. The first setup had been successful, a taste of what was possible. It confirmed that my plan could work, so I did it to him again and again and again. I created new profiles, new personas, each one subtly different, each one designed to appeal to a specific aspect of what I knew he desired based on his profile and our previous conversations. I spent hours crafting messages, engaging in online flirtations, drawing him in, making him believe that this time this woman was real and she was truly interested. I set up dates at different locations around Portland, bars, restaurants, parks, even the waterfront. Each time I would go to the location, position somewhere I could see him arrive and wait. I watched him show up each time, full of anticipation, only to be met with disappointment. Sometimes he'd be stood up entirely, left waiting alone for someone who never existed. Sometimes I would message him shortly before the meeting time, through the fake profile, claiming something had come up and we needed to reschedule, only to then have the new meeting time cancelled at the last minute. Sometimes the fake persona would agree to meet, but then send a text message right before or just after the meeting time saying they had seen him and weren't interested after all, or that something about the meeting felt off. Each failed date was a carefully orchestrated blow to his ego, a small dose of the rejection and uncertainty he had made me feel constantly. I kept a mental tally. 10 dates went south this way, maybe more. It became a routine, a dark game I was playing. It consumed my thoughts, my time, my energy. I was living a double life, pretending to be the girlfriend he thought he had while simultaneously plotting his small-scale humiliations online. The revenge was working. I could see the frustration in his messages through the fake profiles when dates didn't happen. He was clearly annoyed, confused, probably starting to question his luck, maybe even himself. But while the revenge provided a twisted sense of satisfaction, it didn't heal the original wound. The constant effort of maintaining the fake profiles, the emotional toll of reliving his betrayal every time I logged into his dating account or set up a new sting, was draining. I was spending so much energy on him, even in this negative way, that I wasn't truly moving on. The pain was still there, just transmuted into this need for retribution. This period was my rock bottom in a way. I was so focused on making him suffer that I wasn't nurturing myself. My friendships suffered because I was secretive and preoccupied. My work felt less important. I was emotionally exhausted, operating on a cycle of planning, executing, and then feeling a brief, hollow sense of victory followed by the lingering ache of the original betrayal. I was becoming consumed by the revenge, and it wasn't making me happy. It was just changing the nature of my unhappiness. I felt trapped by my own plan, unsure how to stop without feeling like I was letting him win. The revenge wasn't freeing me, it was tying me to him in a new, unhealthy way. I knew I couldn't continue like this indefinitely. The 10 or more failed dates felt like a significant number, enough to have made an impact. The thought of continuing the charade, creating new fake women, watching him fall for it over and over, suddenly felt wearying instead of empowering. It was time to end it, not just the revenge, but the relationship itself. There was no saving what we had, if we ever had anything real at all. I decided it was enough. The time for the elaborate schemes was over. It was time for a clean break, a final confrontation, and a definitive ending. I decided I would break up with him, and I would do it in public. I chose a busy park on a sunny afternoon, a place where there would be plenty of people around, a neutral territory where he couldn't easily isolate me or escalate things physically or emotionally without attracting attention. I met him there, my heart still heavy but my resolve firm. We sat on a bench, the sounds of children playing and distant conversations filling the air. I didn't waste time. I looked him in the eye and told him it was over. He looked genuinely surprised, feigning confusion. "Over? What are you talking about? What's wrong?" he asked, already starting to put on his performance of the concerned boyfriend. That's when I laid it out for him. I told him I knew about the dating site. I told him I knew he had been cheating on me. I told him that was why it was over. He immediately went into denial mode, his face hardening. He denied everything, trying to gaslight me like he always did. He started spinning the story, saying I was being a jealous freak, that I was imagining things, that his dating profile must have been old or inactive, or that I was mistaken. He tried to turn it around on me, to make me doubt myself, to make me feel crazy for confronting him with the truth. He was doing exactly what I knew he would do, but this time I was ready. This time I had my final move planned. I let him finish his denial, watching his performance with a calm I didn't entirely feel but managed to project. When he finished, I looked him straight in the eye, my voice clear and steady despite the tremor in my hands. "All those failed dates," I said, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. His expression shifted from indignant denial to confusion. He blinked at me, unsure of what I was talking about. Then I delivered the punchline. "All me." I saw the color drain from his face. The confusion in his eyes was quickly replaced by a dawning horror, then disbelief, and finally a flicker of recognition. He knew exactly what I meant. He knew about the dates that had fallen through, the women who had canceled or stood him up. He just hadn't connected them to me. "How?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper, his usual smooth facade completely shattered. I smiled, a cold, triumphant smile that felt both alien and satisfying on my face, and then I told him. I didn't explain the fake profiles or the setups in detail. I didn't need to. I just looked at him and calmly recited the username and password he used for the dating site, the same one he had given me years ago for the chess site. I watched his eyes widen as he realized the simple, devastating truth. I had known all along, and I had used his own tools and his own habits against him. I had revealed his secrets, seen his attempts to find someone else, and then I had systematically undermined those attempts. The look on his face was one of utter defeat and shock. His carefully constructed world of lies had just come crashing down around him, exposed by the person he had betrayed. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I stood up from the bench. "It's over," I repeated, my voice firm. And I walked away, leaving him sitting there in the park, surrounded by people, but utterly alone with the knowledge of what I had done. The immediate feeling was a rush of adrenaline, a sense of liberation and finality. The revenge was complete. The relationship was over. It was messy, it was painful, but it was done. Walking away felt like shedding a heavy skin. The days and weeks that followed were a mix of processing the breakup and the complex emotions surrounding the revenge. There was sadness, grief for the relationship I thought I had, but there was also a strange sense of empowerment. I had taken control back. I hadn't just been a passive victim, I had acted. Months after the breakup, long after I thought I would hear from him again, I received an email. It was from him, lengthy and rambling. I almost deleted it without reading, but morbid curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. What I read was astounding. He wrote that what I had done to him was ingenious. He acknowledged the fake dates, admitting how frustrated and confused he had been. He wrote that my actions had proven to him that I was the love of his life, the only woman who could ever truly challenge or understand him. He claimed that I was the only woman who had ever gotten under his skin this way. He wrote that he had completely lost the will for online dating because now, with every new woman he encountered online, he both feared and hoped that it would be me again. He said my revenge had broken his desire to seek out other women because he was haunted by the possibility that any interaction could be another one of my setups. It was a bizarre mix of apology, manipulation, and what almost sounded like admiration. He was trying to reel me back in, framing my revenge as proof of our deep connection. I never answered that email, not a single word, and I never answered any of the other attempts he made to contact me in the following months and even years. He would occasionally send a text message, a social media request, another email, always trying to reestablish contact, always met with silence on my end. My revenge hadn't just ended the relationship, it had clearly left a lasting mark on him, a psychological scar from being outplayed at his own game. The feeling I have about it now, years later, is complex. I don't regret what I did. It felt necessary at the time, a way to reclaim my power and deliver a consequence for his cruel deception. It wasn't the healthiest way to cope, perhaps, and it certainly wasn't pain-free, but it allowed me to feel like I wasn't just disposable. It showed him that I saw through him and that I could fight back. The revenge didn't magically erase the pain of the betrayal, but it did help me close that chapter on my own terms. I moved on with my life in Portland, focusing on my job, rebuilding my friendships, and slowly, cautiously, opening myself up to the possibility of healthy relationships again. I learned valuable, albeit painful, lessons about trusting my gut and recognizing red flags. And sometimes, when I'm having a particularly bad day or when a thought of him crosses my mind, I remember the look on his face in the park when I said, "All me," and it brings a strange, quiet satisfaction. It reminds me that I am stronger than I thought and that even when someone tries to break you, you can find a way to fight back. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.